All right. Good morning,
Hello.
everybody. Hello.
Hello.
Can everybody hear me
I am.
okay?
Yep, you just fine.
Okay, great. Um, this is Amy Gilroy with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. We're going to have a Q&A session on the farm to school equipment and infrastructure grants. I am actually getting over bronchitis, so I may have to pause momentarily to cough. So if you hear a long silence from me, that's probably what's happening. Um, there are, let's see, there's about a handful of you on the call, so we can do this a couple of different ways. I have a few slides that, for those on the call that may not be familiar with the program and how the grant is set up, that I thought we could go through. And then I have question and answer sort of uh, slots under each of those sections. But I think essentially we'll have plenty of time for any question that somebody might have on the line about the grant program. So I think I'll just go ahead and go through the slides first, and then we'll have plenty of time for answering everybody's questions. So just a couple of housekeeping things. If you all could mute, many of you have your lines unmuted. And if you could mute your lines to minimize the background noise, that would be really helpful. And then when you have a question, we're recording this because we're going to put it on the facts page or the website under the grant program. So when you have a question, if you wouldn't mind typing it into the chat box, you should see a chat box there on the control panel for GoToMeeting. We can record the question that way. That would be really great. If you're calling in and don't have access to the webinar, that's no problem. I'll open up the lines after each section, and we can, we can do it verbally, and it'll still record it. It just won't take me as long to transcribe it if it's in the chat box. And then the webinar will be recorded and posted to the website. So if there's something you missed or you wanted to listen to it again, it'll be there. In the future. Okay, let's see. All right, so I'm going to go through just a few slides about background on the Farm to School program for those of you that don't know maybe how it works and how to plug into the program. We're going to talk about the new grant program that ODA has for the first time. It's new for ODA to have funding for Farm to School, even though the program's been around for quite some time. So we're going to talk about the equipment and infrastructure grant that went live. We'll talk about who's eligible, what are some of the allowable projects and costs under the program, what investments you need to make as a producer or food business, and then who are the food sponsors that you can sell to under the program. I know there's been a lot of questions about that. And then some logistical questions about how you'll receive the funds if you're awarded, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Oops. All right, this is just a timeline of some of the important dates coming up under the grant. So we opened the request for applications last week. I think it was actually on the 14th it went live, but the RFA is open. We're having our first outreach webinar today on the 21st. We'll have another one that will be a live webinar on February 5th. So again, hopefully more questions. That might be something to just put on your calendar, or maybe that one will also be recorded and you can come back to the webpage and listen to it at a later time. The RFA closes on March 9th by 5 o'clock, so I will need to receive all applications by 5 p.m. That day. And then we'll be screening applications for the following week, and then there'll be a review by a grant evaluation committee that will be assembled over the next month or so. And then the deck director's office reviews for the final selection of awardees between March 27th and April 15th. And so we're shooting to have all of the awards announced by April 20th this year. So for those that don't know very much about Farm to School, it's a national program designed to introduce kids to where their food comes from, provide local meal options or locally sourced food in their cafeterias, and help connect them to the farmers and producers in their region by providing funding for farm field trips, having farmers come and speak to kids about careers in agriculture or even food processing. And there's a lot of nutrition education also that Farm to School provides to help kids learn about choosing healthy food throughout their lifetime. There's also a pretty significant school garden program that is integral to Farm to School. Oregon has over, I think, almost 700 school gardens, and a lot of those school gardens are part of the district's overall Farm to School program. Some of the districts are sourcing from those school gardens, but by and large, they're mostly a learning environment for school children. In Oregon, we are very lucky because we have a $15 million Farm to School program, which pretty much surpasses anybody in the entire country. Most states have incentive programs for Farm to School, probably funded around 200,000, 500,000. A lot of them are grant funded. Ours is general funded. So it's a very popular program in Oregon and has a lot of political support. And so we'll talk just a few minutes about that as well. Just to give you an idea of how some of that funding has been used here in Oregon, these are the types of projects or programs that we have been funding over the last probably almost 10 years now. But on the left here, you see a young, she's a kindergartner actually, but going through a salad bar and being able to select fresh fruit that's small enough for her to eat in a 20-minute period. This is actually an example from Yamhill County, but these are the types of projects we're trying to work on, where we're trying to get the right size of fresh fruits and vegetables, for example, into salad bars so that kids can actually eat them in the amount of time they have for cafeterias. And it's also a great opportunity for farmers who are growing those smaller count orchard crops like pears and apples. And it's a great market channel for them for their smaller crops. Some other projects we're funding, this other one in the middle here is actually an outdoor education site at Riley Creek Elementary School in Gold Beach. And some of the Farm to School funding we've had has helped actually build that greenhouse and that outdoor classroom and help fund the school garden program there at that elementary school. It's quite popular. And then also farm field trips on the right here. We've provided funding to help bring school children out to farms, in their communities. So how does it work? The Farm to School program is a cooperative program between the Oregon Department of Education and the Oregon Department of Agriculture. The Department of Education actually oversees the majority of the program. They are responsible for processing the claims, for example, that districts submit when they make a qualified purchase of an Oregon product. They enroll the school districts in the program, and they also work on the school garden inventory for the state. My job is to help connect the school districts and now these additional new food sponsors who are eligible for the funding under the new Farm to School bill to producers and processors and distributors that they want to work with. So I'm really serving kind of as a liaison between the agricultural community and the food business community or manufacturers and schools, and just kind of helping to match make between them. I also do some food product development and reformulating of product with food businesses who want to make sure their products meet the school meal standards. And so I do help with that and work with the team at the Food Innovation Center to do that. So what's really important, I think, to know for this for this session for the 2019 to 2021 biennium is that House Bill 2579 expanded the Farm to School program from $4.6 million to $15 million. That's quite a significant jump in funding, and the majority of that funding, about $11 million of it, should be available to help schools, early childcare centers, and summer meal sites source Oregon product. So there's a significant amount of money available for those food sponsors to purchase from businesses like you, as long as you have qualified products. There's other elements of the program and 3 new grant programs. I'm not going to go into those, but I am going to talk about the one that you're all on the call for today, which is the Equipment and Infrastructure Grant. Like I said, there's more eligible partners now, producers and processors, clearly through this grant. Higher education and cooperative extension are also eligible under a couple of the other grants. And then those food sponsors that previously haven't been eligible, like early childcare sites and summer meal sites. So I thought it'd be important for us to just quickly review the existing procurement grant and the way it works with school districts who are part of the Farm to School program. So the way that the procurement grant works, which is how a majority of the school districts participate in Farm to School in Oregon, is the Department of Education determines a reimbursement amount that's based on a formula of the student meal count, as well as free and reduced meal eligibility and total student population, to determine, for example, how much a district is eligible for in reimbursement for making purchases of Oregon product. So districts usually will find out at the beginning of the school year that they have X amount of money available to them to draw down from over the school year period, and and then what they do is they go ahead and they can either work with a producer or a processor in their region. They can find and procure local food through their distributors. They have a lot of different options of where they can find Oregon products. What's changed for this particular grant program is that, as I mentioned, 2 new sponsors are now eligible for those funds. So that includes this the early child care centers, as I mentioned, as well as the summer meal sites. So now school districts that are in National School Lunch and those other 2 entities are eligible to opt in to the procurement grant. So they don't have to apply, they just simply opt in for the program, and they're given these funds to work with. And what can they buy? They can buy anything that's grown, harvested, raised, caught, or manufactured in Oregon. There are a few exceptions. I'm not going to go into detail on those, but those include just bakery items and liquid milk in smaller ounce containers. And so the reimbursement covers all qualified for food purchases and some of the labor costs that districts face when they are trying to find Oregon foods. So a lot of you asked, does my product qualify for the Farm to School program? And as I mentioned, anything that's grown, raised, or harvested in Oregon or caught in Oregon does qualify. Anything that's produced in Oregon, but then there's further value added to it, also qualifies. The only thing that don't qualify anymore, that have been removed from the eligibility list, are something that's grown elsewhere, but it's processed in Oregon. It's minimally processed in Oregon. So something like orange wedges or chopped pineapple, something that's not grown in this state, and there's very little value given to it by minimally processing it like that to get it ready for school meals, would no longer qualifies. This is just a slide to give you a sense of what's actually on the school lunch plate and how much is required. So districts, schools, and any of those the other food sponsors that I mentioned, the child and adult care or early child centers and the summer meal sites, they have to follow the same guidelines for participation in USDA food assistance programs. So this just gives you a sense of what's actually on the plate, and then the minimum amount of these different food categories that are required to be available for a student to choose from. And I think a lot of you I've been working with me on helping determine how your products meet these equivalents for the meal plate. But I just wanted to let you know that this is something that you will want to make sure you go over with with me or your school or childcare center that you're going to be working with under your project. So let's talk a little bit about the Equipment Infrastructure Grant program. So again, it's a new program at ODA. We received a $500,000. We've received $500,000 authority to implement the program from ODE, and it's a pilot. So this is the first time we've done it, and I'm hopeful that it'll be successful and we can get more funding to be able to support a lot of other producers and food businesses that want to sell to schools. So who's eligible? Producers, ranchers, seafood harvesters, and for-profit businesses such as local manufacturers, whose primary function involves production, processing, and distribution of food service products or some combination up to schools. So the questions I've received so far is, does a distributor qualify, for example? If they're solely distributing or repackaging and distributing food, they would not qualify. So a wholesale distributor would not be eligible for these funds. But these other examples here would be. And then projects that aim to increase the sale of Oregon agricultural products by either increasing the production or processing to meet school market demand. So you do need to demonstrate that you intend to increase your sale of qualified products, either through producing, harvesting, and selling those to schools or further processing it. And the reimbursement that you'll receive, and actually I shouldn't say, this is not necessarily a reimbursement grant, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the funding, which you will be able to receive 50% upfront, will cover the majority of your equipment and infrastructure costs. And it'll also cover some of the labor for installing equipment or infrastructure. And then one of the other provisions we've made is for you to be able to use the funds for any food safety implementation or necessary programming that you might need, like on-farm food safety plans, or maybe you want to become GAP certified, or you need a kitchen license. Those types of costs would be eligible under the grant as well. So the purpose of it is to provide financial assistance to you. Again, for those of you that intend to sell product to the eligible entities under the Farm to School program. So selling to only selling to these sponsors under this project is where we would be expecting you to focus. That doesn't mean that you won't be producing or processing product that for other markets, equivalent markets, food service markets or otherwise. But these would be the type of sponsors we expect you to work with. So how do you find these sponsors? So where do you find your eligible buyers in your community? So you can ask me, and I can, if you're looking for a particular region, maybe you want to work just in your county or your, a 3-county area or a particular area in the state, I can let you know who those sponsors are in those regions. So you can start reaching out to them. Maybe you have relationships with some of them already, but we do know everyone that is enrolled in the procurement grant. You can also reach out to Rick Sherman, who's my counterpart at Department of Education. He also maintains those lists as well. And then the Farm to School and School Garden Network Regional Hub organization, either Megan Kemple or Melina Barker here will also be working with the regional hubs around the state to help connect producers and schools and the other sponsors as well. So these are a few resources for you if you need some help with finding eligible food sponsors for your project. So for the purpose of the program, so we've had some questions about intend. What does it mean by do I intend to sell to a school or a food sponsor under the bill? And so what we've decided that definition includes is those persons who have a history of selling food products to schools in the past. They currently sell food products to schools, or they maybe do not currently sell food to schools, but plan to do so in the near future. So I've had a lot of questions about, oh, I haven't sold to a school, is this available to me? And so the funding is, yes, we're trying to cover everybody here, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. So the funds are intended to support businesses that will start or expand processing and aggregating capacity to sell Oregon products to schools. That includes organizations or businesses like physical food hubs. Those would be eligible for these funds. Someone who wants to increase the use and processing of Oregon agricultural products. And then anything that's produce Oregon grown or raised crops and or livestock. I think what we're trying to get at here is that we're interested in both funding farmers or growers as well as those that further process food. So who are the producers? What are a producer or processor under this grant program? How are we defining them? So these are the definitions that we're using. A producer includes any of the following entities: a person who leases, rents, or owns Oregon land, whether the land is publicly owned, privately owned, or tribal land on which crops are cultivated or livestock is raised. We're trying to be flexible with the land ownership models, but you do need to be cultivating crop that's eligible under the program or raising livestock. An Oregon seafood harvester, and then an Oregon business that increases the use and processing of Oregon agricultural products for schools. So these would be, people that are further processing products and then packaging them, excuse me, and distributing them, or some combination of, and then an agricultural cooperative or aggregation group as well. So these are some other eligibility standards we have under the grant program. You must be registered to do business in Oregon. We will be confirming that with Secretary of State. You must be in good standing with the state of Oregon and ODA. So what does that mean? People have asked me about good standing. And essentially the way we're going to be determining that is just using our ODA, if applicable, ODA grant programs. If you've received grant programs in the past, I'm sorry, if you've seen grant funds from ODA in the past, have they been used well? And are you in good standing with those programs? And then if there's any food safety violations, those are something we just want to take a look at. I mean, that's not to say you couldn't receive a violation and still be funded, because that does happen quite often. We just want to make sure that in general the business is in good standing. And then you do need to meet a level of food safety that's consistent with your business. And we're really willing to work with you on that. We realize a lot of you may not have the food safety certification requirements that you need potentially coming into your projects, and that some of the funding you'll be requesting will be used to cover those costs. And that's totally fine. We just want to see you describe that in your application. ODA is encouraging diverse applicants to apply, so women and people of color owned or operated farms and businesses, and then also certified businesses under the Business Inclusion and Diversity Program are encouraged to apply, and we have some information about that in the application. So if people have questions about that, we can go over that as well. All right, so I think I'm going to stop here and see if there's any questions about eligible applicants. And it looks like there are none in the chat box. And if anybody is calling in and you aren't able to see the webinar slides, if you have any questions right now about eligible applicants, go ahead and ask them. I'll give you a minute here. Okay, I have a question about, would this include school farm programs? I'm assuming, Richard, are you talking about farms on um, farms that are on school property, and the farms are actually producing food for the cafeteria? Could you describe that a little bit better? Okay. So someone is using the grounds to grow food and sell it to the district. Yeah, I think if you have a farmer that is working with you, or you have someone that is regularly cultivating that land, is going to be selling that produce, or somehow providing that produce for the cafeteria, they would be eligible. Okay. Any other questions about eligible applicants? All right. We operate a nonprofit that owns property in Lane County. We will be doing business for the first year in Oregon. Veterans Legacy houses homeless vets, and we intend to sell to schools in the Fern Ridge School District in Lane County. So Brendan, you have a question. If you are, again, if you are growing, if you are a farmer or a producer who's cultivating on that land, and you're going to be selling that product to an institution like a school, you would qualify. You do need to, again, for the purposes of this grant, you would have to have a commitment or an intent to buy letter from Fern Ridge School District in Lane County. Um, and that purchase would be, both need to be making, we'll talk about this in a little bit too, but have to make a good faith effort to make that sale happen by 2021, I believe. No, sorry, 2022, which we can go over. So yes, you do technically qualify. All right, so it looks like we have a question here. If a food hub is only helping with distribution, picking up from farmers and delivering to schools, and facilitating purchasing through a website, is it eligible? No, it is not eligible. Yes, you would need to be, you would either, in that instance, you would need to be um, adding some additional value um, to the food that you're aggregating. So minimally processing it, for example, Katie, if you were going to be, maybe chopping, slicing, somehow getting it ready to be more convenient for a school district to use. You as the aggregator um, could be eligible if you're going to add that minimal processing capacity. But the farmers you're working with could be eligible for the funding if they wanted to sell their product directly to the schools. But just simply sorting the produce and repackaging it would not qualify. Okay, any further questions about eligible applicants or projects, I guess, too? Any questions really you can ask at this point. All right, question here from Autumn. As a new producer with intent to sell to a school district, what is the required timeline from the initial investment to final sale? Well, that's a good question. So there is no requirement under the grant that you make the sale to a school. In order to be competitive under the grant, though, I would say we would need to see that a purchase is likely to occur between the school and the producer in this instance within that time period. So there is a intent to buy letter that we will be asking you to complete with the school district or the early child care center or the summer meal site you'll be working with, or however many you're working with. We're saying we don't want to see more than 3 letters. You can be working with more than 3 food sponsors, but we would need to see those letters, and they would need to articulate the agreement that you've made, the products that the district will be purchasing, the specifications, the frequency they'll be purchasing them. And then we both ask you to sign that agreement as a good faith effort to make that sale within a year after the grant ends. So, we don't have a, we know that things happen. We know that crops fail. We know that there's all sorts of changes that are unforeseen that may prevent a sale from happening. So we can't require that to happen or make it a contingency upon receiving the funds, I should say. But we are strongly encouraging that your applications show evidence that sale will happen within a year after the grant program ends. Okay, there's another question about, from Matt, is there a requirement for the amount of Oregon crops used as a percentage of the final product? There's not. We don't, we do not require there to be a certain amount of Oregon ingredients. We don't have a way to actually enforce something like that would take a tremendous amount of resource. We have about 20,000 claims a year that come in from school districts all over the state. And what we ask them to tell us is whether or not they know the product is Oregon grown or grown and processed. We don't have the ability to determine the percentage of the amount of Oregon ingredients. Now, you might have seen on the score sheet of the application material that you do get extra points if you're processing more than 51% Oregon ingredients, if you are a food processor or a food business. So if you are doing that, that is something you would receive a little bit more credit for. We are trying to incentivize the use of Oregon agricultural inputs in your products. Okay, I'm going to keep going through the slides, and I'll just keep an eye on the chat box. And I apologize again for my cough this morning. I'm still recovering from bronchitis. So some of the projects that we're looking for, this is a little bit repetitive, but we are looking at, again, we want to see that you're going to be increasing your sales of Oregon agricultural products, either produced products or processed products. And really what we're looking for here is, the purpose of these funds is to help really start that relationship. And some of you have those relationships, but maybe maybe in those instances, it's to be used to expand your capacity to reach more buyers. But we really wanted to see that this is going to increase sales and open up market channels between institutional buyers. So we hope that these funds are going to kind of jumpstart that. So we're really going to want to see you explain in your application how this funding will help you do that. We did propose that we would have 2 tracks for this grant program. We've actually dissolved that. We will now be funding, everybody's going to be applying together, and you can request between $5,000. No, I'm sorry. You have to request funds greater than $5,000 and less than $100,000. So those are the minimum and maximum of the amount you can request. You must have all of your funds spent by June 30th, 2021. So that is something to think about. Your project may be, you might have a more long-term project that's going to extend beyond that date, and that's totally fine. And we definitely want to know that this is contributing to your overall project. But the portion of it that you're asking for funds from ODA for needs to be completed by June 30th, 2021. So all funds that we would award you would need to be spent by then. All right, this is just some legalese, but I think it's important to just quickly go over that again. This, if you want to look into the details of what are the allowable products, although I think I covered them pretty superficially, or I mean inclusively, because it's fairly straightforward. But you can review the Oregon Administrative Rules 581.017.04330. This will tell you what types of products specifically that are allowable under the grant program. But I'm pretty sure most people on this call have products that qualify. Of importance, though, is to note that the grants no longer covers fluid milk sold or served in cartons or other containers of 8 ounces in size or less, and some of those other dispensers too that you can read there. And then also a lot of the baked products like buns and rolls and breads. And the reason for this is that these are Oregon products already. Most of them are already Oregon. Most milk and baked products come from Oregon that are on the school lunch plate. And the idea behind the funding is not to supplant existing purchases, but to provide funding for helping districts diversify their school lunch plate. So these types of products again are on the meal plate every day, and they're not achieving the legislative intent of the program. So they have been removed over the I think it was 2 bienniums ago. They were removed from the allowable or eligible product list. So, for example, you would not probably want to apply for funds for producing these products. Just some quick examples of some of the equipment that would be allowable under these purchases. I'm sorry, these funds. You can read those. I'll just give you a minute. Okay, and then moving on to infrastructure, there's been a lot of questions about what do we mean by infrastructure. Again, that was part of the legislative language in the bill. So infrastructure expenses that may be eligible under this program include improvements to existing buildings or facilities. So I've had a lot of questions about, can I expand my into this existing warehouse or this I maybe have a room off of my kitchen that I want to remodel. Um, those would be allowable types of infrastructure. So what would not be allowable is new purchases of buildings or new land purchases. Those are not eligible under the grant program as infrastructure. Fees for food safety licensure, for example. So if you have to have an inspector come out and inspect your kitchen, and that's going to be $500, those types of costs would be allowable under the project. If you were going to have an on-farm readiness audit or you wanted to receive GAP certification, those costs would also be eligible under infrastructure. Grading or paving roads or driveways and providing broadband or fiber optic systems and software systems. These are included in the legal definition of infrastructure according to Oregon state statute because they're part of the physical systems necessary for businesses. However, we're not, an application that came in that was going to propose to pave, for example, a large section of driveway may not be as competitive as another application that was using modest infrastructure upgrades. I think what we're looking for here is, if there is a pad or gravel that needed to be poured to help minimize mud or something like that at a loading dock, and as a portion of the project costs, those might be more competitive projects. Again, we know infrastructure can be very expensive, but what we're looking for here is, a portion of the total project cost to be just a small portion of it to be used for infrastructure. And I can answer more questions about that. Okay, questions about eligible projects and some of these expenses I've talked about. All right, a question here from Richard. Would upgrading an existing plastic greenhouse to a more four-season greenhouse qualify as infrastructure. Yeah, I don't see why not. Okay, well, I'll just watch the chat box here. It doesn't seem like there's any more questions coming in at this time about that. Okay, again, projects must be between, you must only request funds for between $5,000 and $100,000. And then funds will be available for projects between April 2020 and June 2021. So that's really the project phase that we're looking at here for these funds. Okay, another question from Kent. Kent, you ask, I have a variety of things I want or need to do. So are these separate projects? Yeah, I think that I've had a question like this from a couple of other producers, and I don't think that they are I don't think that they are separate projects. If you can demonstrate that they're all linked to your intent to sell to a food sponsor or the project you're working on with your food sponsors, I mean, I would really recommend that you all build a relationship or start, if you haven't already, identify a school district or summer meal site, et cetera, that you'll be working with on this project to really help identify what it is specifically you want to work on together over the next year, a little over a year, almost a year and a half. And again, I realize that that can be part of a larger overall bigger project or multiple projects, but you really want to isolate, at least to us, isolate the project components that are going to be critical for you to increase your sale of Oregon products to schools that you're going to be working with. And I think it's okay in some instances for you to ask for additional funding that's related to these maybe side projects. The evaluation committee might not recommend funding them in full because they will have the ability to award partial funding, which again, ODA may do just depending on the applicant pool and the competitiveness of the applications. So I would think that, the more you can sort of thread the needle between your projects, the better to show how they can contribute to your overall business plan to be selling into these institutions. We would hope that these funds, this infusion of funds would continue to impact your business relationship with these institutional buyers beyond the extent of the grant. So that's the other thing, that I think is really critical that we'd like to see from applicants is that this isn't going to be just a one-time sale, that there's the intent for you to expand this market channel. So to the extent that your projects or your multiple projects do that, then I think, yes, we'd want to know about them. Okay, so I wanted to quickly go over the matching funds requirement under the grant. So a lot of people have asked about this as well. And we are trying to level the playing field here. So that's why we do have these tiered matching fund requirements and fairly, modest matching requirements under the grant. So So what we are asking all of you to do is to provide, matching funds are a requirement. And basically, this varies, depends on your experience selling to schools. So if you've been selling to schools for some time, you have an established market with districts for more than 5 years, we're expecting you to provide a 20% matching funds of your requested funds. If you've been selling to schools for 1 to 4 years, if you've been selling to schools from 1 to 4 years, we're requesting a 15% match. And if you have no experience selling to schools, we're requesting a 10% match. And so, these are the investment tiers that we are looking for from your applications. And so what qualifies as match, we're trying to be as flexible as possible with match. So we are allowing both cash match as well as in-kind match. And so cash match is simply that. It's defined as real cash contributions towards the project. So if you have funds that you are using, monies that you're using through loans or grants or other liquid capital assets towards your overall project, you can use those as match. You can also use the value of equipment or infrastructure that you've already purchased. That's again contributing to the project. So you would need to again clearly define in your application how that contributes to the project. So equipment and infrastructure would be eligible. And then in-kind match is also allowed under this grant. So that would be any of any labor. So for example, if you could demonstrate that you have maybe you have a estimation of the cost for installing a piece of equipment. And you or maybe someone that you're working with would install that as their own personal labor instead of using a contractor to do so. You could use that as match as well. So your personal labor, and I see we have use of existing equipment or facilities in here twice. I'm not sure why that's there. It's probably not supposed to be there. And then a person on loan from another organization or business. So, a lot of you have relationships with other tradesmith, and so maybe some of their labor time that could also be used towards the match requirement. You would just need to track and demonstrate in your application how you intend to track that time and make sure that that time is fulfilled under the matching requirement. All right, some questions about funding have come up. So we are going to do an advanced funds for this grant. So if you're successful in your application, you'll receive 50% of your requested and approved funds. And I shouldn't say requested because really you may be funded at a reduced amount, but than what you originally requested. But you will receive 50% of the hopefully requested and approved funds up front. And then you will receive the additional funding in 2 installments, 25% each. And those are contingent upon the submission of a progress report accompanied by a bill of sale, invoices, or even purchasing order. I realize in some instances the timeline of purchasing your equipment or installing your equipment or having a contractor come out and work on your building may not totally line up. So we just need to know, that you're on track with the project. And then you need to complete a monitoring site visit by ODA staff, which is probably me and most likely Gabrielle Redhead, who's our specialty crop block grant coordinator. One of us will likely be doing that monitoring site visit. And then the final 25% of awarded funds would be distributed after you completed your final report and final expenditure worksheet. So that remaining that last 25% may, in fact, be more as a reimbursement. It's really going to depend on your project. All right, questions about funding or matching requirements? Looks like we have one from Richard. Yes. That's a good question. I'm not totally sure about that. Richard, could donation of school property for the program, a lease, be calculated as in kind? I know that we've talked a little bit about this already, but indirect costs or overhead costs are unallowable under the project. Typically, we would not make them allowable as a match either. So I guess I would probably say no, but I can double check that with staff. So let me get back to you on that. If you can give me your email in the chat box there, I can confirm that for you. All right, and then a question about, can a producer request funds for reimbursement of equipment that needed to be purchased before applications are due or before funds awarded? Um, I'm not really sure what that means. The projects can't start before, no projects can start before the funds are awarded. So if you're asking for reimbursement of something you've purchased before the projects have started, before yeah, I would say no. Okay, question here from Matt. We will be moving our facility to a new location between now and the deadline of 6/30/2021. Would that become an issue with the grant application? I mean, as long as that is not affecting your project, I don't think that would be an issue. That's correct, Kent. So you have to wait until after April 20th. Okay, yeah, so you have to wait until after you've signed a contract with the Department of Agriculture. You've assigned an agreed contract for the final awarded amount for your project to buy anything you would need under the project. Okay, another question from Katie. I've worked with schools for tri-days via local extension. I'm assuming tri-days are taste test days. Technically, extension purchased my produce. Does this count towards the number of years? Let's see, sorry. Does that count towards the number of years for the match percentage? Are you asking if the purchase of the produce counts as match? Oh, I see what you're saying. You're trying to determine um, how many years of experience you have selling to schools. I would probably say no, because taste testing is very different than procuring food through the cafeteria meal program. But you do have some experience. Yeah, I think if if you haven't actually gone through a procurement process with a school district, I would say that probably doesn't count. If you as a business. All right, another question from Richard. We can continue with current growth and development, but the ODA grant would be for major upgrades, question mark. Can you be more specific? Yeah, I mean, again, if you are just getting, so Richard asks, we have current development plans with our budget, but this would be a huge jumpstart to them. Yeah, I mean, if you are new to selling to schools and this would be a big infusion of funds for you to get started, that is an allowable approach to a project. Um, again, you just need to demonstrate how you will increase the sale of Oregon agricultural products under the project, and you must have those letters of intent to buy that are, fairly detailed about what it is that you'll be doing under the project with the school or summer meal site. Sorry, there's some background noise there. Yeah, that's totally fine. It's fine if you have a large project that you would be looking for funding for, that would be new for you to be doing in terms of developing a market channel with these food sponsors. Okay. So I wanted to just sort of quickly go over the application. I don't know if I don't know. I think maybe what I'll do is there's so few of you on the call that maybe I'll just open up the line for general questions at this point. Let me just see what else I was going to try to get through here. I think I only had a couple more slides. Yeah, I'll just quickly go through these. So, I'm assuming everybody is taking a look at the application, and and I guess since you've all probably seen the application, I think I'll skip this slide. But this is generally the application sections that we want you to complete. And again, the more detail you can provide and the more you can link each of these segments together with how this is going to increase your overall sales of Oregon products to the food sponsors, the stronger your application will be. The more detail you can provide, again, I can't stress that enough, but the more detail you can provide, the better. Please try to stay within you'll see the minimum word counts and maximum word counts. I would encourage you to stay within those limits. ODA does reserve the right to reject any application that exceeds those limits. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. And again, with your matching funds, because we are trying to be so flexible with the matching funds, it's really important that you describe in detail how you're going to secure those commitments for matching funds. Again, if it's external labor or a contractor that's going to be helping you, and then also how you are going to be documenting those matching funds over the duration of the grant. The food safety, obviously, a very important aspect of your proposals. Again, I want to stress that you won't be evaluated on your existing food safety status. Again, you can use the funds to achieve a food safety certification or licensure that's consistent with your business. So you won't be evaluated on food safety, and you probably noticed that in the score sheet as well, that there was not a requirement for food safety or points awarded for food safety. You do have to complete a work plan. Again, I'd encourage you to be as detailed as possible, but stay within that there's a 2-page limit on the work plan. And complete your budget detail again as clearly as possible. Let's talk just briefly about that letter of intent to buy. So you do have to submit letters of intent to buy. Those must be completed by the school or early child care or summer meal site that will be part of your project. You will probably need to get, whoever has authority to prepare a letter like that, whether it's a school administrator or principal, whoever it might be, center director, but that will need to be on their letterhead and will need to be signed by both of you. It's going to basically explain the terms of you working together, describe the products and specifications, the impact on their school meal program, and then has the statement about the agreement of both of you entering into a mutual good faith effort to execute a sale of the product by June 30th, 2022. So we are asking you to do that within a 1-year extension of the grant program. Again, that's the only extension that would apply in this grant. There'd be no extended funds, no extended reporting. Everything would have to be spent by June 30th, 2021, but you and the district or the center you're working with would have an additional year to make that sale happen. All right, well, that concludes my slides. I'm just going to open it up for general questions that people might have at this point. So feel free to unmute your lines if you're calling in, or type your question in the chat box. Okay, I'll give it another minute here. Don't have any questions coming in yet.
Hi, Amy. Can I ask a question?
Sure. Hi, Matilda.
Yeah, I was thinking the project is on June 2021. What about if we finish the project in less than 3 months? So should we wait until next fall to get a order from our sponsor?
You'd finish your project in 3 months?
Mm-hmm. And then like 3 months will be, for instance, from this April, let's say by September, I done with my project and I finished everything I have said that I need to upgrade my facility to be able to serve my sponsor. So when I should be waiting to start getting an order to that sponsor?
Yeah. No, you can complete your project in that time frame. Sure. Yeah, we do have people have had questions about can they, if they're going to be on an expedited timeline for their project, and that's totally fine. As long as it's clear what you're going to accomplish in those 3 or 4 months, you can complete your project earlier. And again, if your district, and then if this food sponsor you're working with, I guess it'll depend on their timeline as well. We would just want to see how you all have agreed to that. So yeah, that's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Amy, this is Katie.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question about, I guess, the intent to buy. Does the quantity you're planning to sell to the school district affect the competitiveness of your application? So, like right now, I'm at a pretty small scale. I'd probably only be signing up to do a few times a year for those tasting days with the goal of building up to a more consistent supply. But yeah, just curious about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think that is as important as I think that as long as the scale of your project, that in terms of the funding you're asking for is consistent with that, um, with that estimated increase in sales. So if you were asking for $100,000, but you only anticipated, maybe making a sale twice, or maybe one sale, or maybe the volume was extremely low, there might be some questions about why that is. Um, if you're asking for such a large amount of money. So I think that there'd be a couple things that the committee or the evaluation committee may look at, and one is, how much of the product, um, how much product, what volume and frequency um, will be made with the school, but then also how much of it is your overall. They may also look at your overall sales, like, if you're predominantly selling to this, if this would be making up such a small portion of your overall markets, that might be something they would consider as well. Like, what's the overall impact going to be like for the investment the state's making? So I think, again, the more competitive proposal would outline maybe a plan for a steady increase in sales, or the goal of an increase in sales over time, as a means to establish a stable and consistent relationship with the institutional buyers that you're proposing to work with, or even to potentially expand beyond the one or two maybe school districts you might want to work with. And again, I think it's all going to be relative to the scale too, because in your region, we realize there are smaller districts, a lot of smaller farmers. So we're already expecting, we're not expecting you to have large volumes of product, or the frequency to be very high, maybe in those instances, especially because you're in the Klamath Falls region, right?
Yeah.
Especially because you are just getting started too. So I think there's going to be a number of factors, that we'd be looking at, that would extend just beyond, the large volume of product that could be coming into the school district, because we're trying to achieve diversity in the types of businesses, the scale of businesses and farmers that are awarded the funds. So, volume and frequency would not be as competitive a factor as some of the other things I mentioned.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Let's see here. Will the new webinar cover the same information or present something new? That question comes from Kent. Yeah, I think it's going to be essentially similar to this one. I don't know who will be on it. The questions may be different, so it's likely to be new. But I probably won't change these slides. They'll probably just run through the same slides and have the same Q&A session for people. So it might be something to listen to. Again, that one will be recorded as well. And then we'll upload it under our facts section, so people can get clarifying questions answered. We'll try to transcribe the questions into a document, so you don't have to listen through a hour and a half long webinar to get your question answered. Okay, there's still a few of you on the line. Do you have further questions today?
This is Ron with Coos River Ranch. We're just more, taking notes and trying to get our heads wrapped around this entire program. Not trying to not engage, but trying to be, absorbing more of the information since it's so new to us, and trying to, gauge the total scope of what we want to achieve with this program.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Ron. Are you working with Jody?
Yes, that's correct. Coos River Ranch in Coos Bay, Oregon.
Do you have any questions for me at this time?
Well, one of our questions was with the food safety. Being right now currently being a UPIC produce farm, we don't really know what we need to pursue, what relevant information, in order to sell direct to the schools. It's such a total new thing to us. We don't really know what our requirements are going to be on the food safety side,
Yeah. Well, we do
And
sort
not
of.
processing, just producing, we're not necessarily at this point trying to, what would be a good resource who would be the good resource to talk to understand the total scope of food safety on our end.
You're only doing, you're only producing, you're a grower, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So I would recommend, we have certified GAP certified UPIC farms in the past. So that is something that would be, I think, an option for you if part of this project, if you needed some level of food safety certification under your project because you're a UPIC operation. The best option for you is to call Susanna Perlstein. Let me see if I can get her number here for you. So there's also some upcoming produce safety webinars that might be that might be really helpful for you. But you'd want to contact Susanna Perlstein. I'm going to type her information here into the chat box. She's our produce safety program manager, and especially if you're a grower, she would be the best person to talk to about the requirements of a UPIC. So I would recommend giving her a call or shooting her an email as soon as you can.
Do you have an email for her? We're not.
Yep.
Or phone number? We're not online.
Oh, you're not? Okay. So her cell phone number is 971-283-4749. And then her email address is sperlstein. So that's S as in Sam, P as in Peter, E A as in Apple, R L Stein, STEIN, and then it's at oda.state.or.us. And I'll just email Jody. I have Jody's email, so I'll email her all this too.
Yeah, when I say not on the webinar, we're just on the phone call.
Sorry?
But yeah, I just, when I said, I want to clarify, when I said we're not online, we're not on the webinar on the computer. We're just on the phone. But I thank you very much for the information, because we definitely got to cross some more T's and dot some more I's to understand where we fall in this program.
Sure. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me with any questions. But for the produce safety information, I would definitely contact Susanna as soon as you can.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? There's a few callers still on the line. All right. Well, thanks for joining the call, everybody. And I will talk to you later.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. I understand more than before. Thanks very much for the seminar, for the webinar.
Oh, you're welcome, Matilda. Yeah. Did you get a hold of Jason?
Yes, I just get an email from him. He wants 2 more info, and that he said that's really straightforward, what I already sent. So that's gonna be quick.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well,
Bye.
let me know if you need anything. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Amy. Bye-bye.